I think I do about 40 a week right now. And if I had 100 students, would I do it every week? Maybe not. Or I'd probably try and get an assistant to grade half of them each week. I've done that so that one week the first person will take, you know, the first half of them and I'll take the other half and vice versa if I've got more than that. I think it's feasible to handle about 45 or 50. But then many of my colleagues would disagree. They think grading every week at a graduate program is too demanding anyway. I think the payoff is really worth it.
So in that case, we have to devise some other means of finding or bringing the critical findings.
Well, another way to do it, which I've done but I don't like as well, is to use a website, something like Moodle or Blackboard, and have the students post and respond to each other. And you get a certain kind of response when you're doing that. But the depth is different and the safety isn't there. So because it's a much more public kind of comment. So whereas when they're doing it in journals, to me personally, I get a lot about their backgrounds, their family backgrounds. I can tell you very quickly which ones are first generation students, who grew up in poverty, who's resonating with different readings in a way that they probably wouldn't share in a public posting. But if you've got a lot of students, that's another way to at least push them a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like I, as a teacher educator, I had to teach about, you know, a class of over 100 and so just one class, and there were a number of classes, which means about 300.
You could tell them that they have to hand them in every week, but you're going to grade them every third week, and they're not going to know which week you're grading them. I mean, there are lots of ways to get them to do it. Yes?
I'd like to try and say this at work, if I may. I'm impressed by your wish, desire, or commitment to reading all that work every week, or however it comes in. If you used your doctoral candidates as a community of practice, assuming that they're meeting on a regular or irregular basis, could they not, in fact, share their reflections with each other and therefore build up what they and Menger and others talk about as a development of practice through sharing, through discussion, through doing, in fact, all the things which your presentation illustrated you were teaching or looking at in a conceptual sense. So they do it in the practical sense.
Well, I think that's what I was just responding to. I do that as well sometimes. I ask them to post and respond to each other, and so you end up with a dialogue among themselves as well. But it's a different kind of dialogue. There's a different safety, even when they've been together for a couple of years, in them talking to me. I tell them that the journals are private. They're not private in the sense I don't read them, but they're private in the sense that I won't share anything they've said unless I ask permission first. So even if somebody said something that's really important for the rest of the class, I go to them privately, or I'll write back to them, would you be willing to share this with the class? So they're private, and that sometimes the things that they're willing to share privately with me, they won't share as they're pushing each other. So I think there's a place for both. And I think that the more they develop this questioning, the reflexivity, the common sense of purpose, the more you can do what you're talking about. But if it's an initial course in a cohort, I wouldn't even do it that way. I would do the personal. But they all respond to me. They hate it at first. These are headmasters. They're busy people. I give them about 100 pages of reading a week. Then they come in on a Wednesday night. We teach them from 5:30 till 9:30. That's a long time after a busy day. And then they have to go home and write 1,500 words sometime in the weekend. And they hate it. And they say, do you know how long it takes us? And I say, yes, do you know how long it takes me to read them? And they sort of say, oh. By the end of the course, and I don't ask them to do a journal if there's a paper due or something else. I mean, every once in a while they have a week off. And the last few weeks I sometimes don't have journals because they're working on a final paper for the course. And they came into class this past summer and they said, do you know that once we had to stop writing journals, we didn't read as carefully? And I said, of course I know that. And they have now, every class I've given these kinds of reflexive journals to have said, we hated it at first, but it's the most valuable thing you've asked us to do. And so I know there are other ways that other people can get cohorts to really push each other and engage in dialogue with each other. I don't think it substitutes for the relationship that they feel they develop with me as I do it. But other people might have a different experience. I don't know. Yes?
Comment on the question. Just a comment. I mean, I just want to say thank you for being so open and direct in terms of presenting it. There's a case where you pay off. And it's a very personal account.
Yeah. Yes.
The question is, in terms of the pedagogy as a model that you presented, represented, do you think there's anything that's distinctive in your approach to EDD students, MD students, and PhD students, or is it all one and the same thing?
I think it's, in my approach to them, it's really one and the same thing. I think the difference comes in the kind of research that we're willing. The University of Illinois doesn't make a very good distinction between PhD and EDD, and many programs that have both programs don't. But what we do require is that in the PhD dissertation, the literature review is more comprehensive. The research is more original. We don't allow as much emphasis on more action research. Problems of practice, yes, in both programs, but the extent of the literature, the extent of the discussion needs to be different. We will allow in an EDD things like policy analysis, or we've gone away from self-study. It really, if you're going to do an autoethnography, we require students to do a lot of work in understanding the method, whether it's EDD or PhD, because otherwise you get pretty shoddy research about, oh, I implemented this program and this is what I remember doing, and here's where it was successful. And I inherited a lot of that when I went to the University of Illinois, so we went away from that. Mostly it's the emphasis in the dissertation, and they have different research methods requirements in the PhD than we do in our EDD, so we expect them to be better versed in methods and methodological issues as PhD students.
Just a quick question on top of that. Given what you said, which is more suited to educating tomorrow's leaders in education, PhD or
Well, given that I said there wasn't very much difference, I think it depends on where they want to exercise leadership. I think if somebody really knows at the outset that their goal is to be a university professor, that probably the range of theories to which they're exposed, the range of methodological issues, the PhD is better. I would think if they really know that they want to spend most of their career as a head teacher or as a superintendent, the EDD makes sense. When I was at the University of British Columbia, before I went to the University of Illinois, we had both an EDD and a PhD, and there was no distinction. So we closed the EDD down for a couple of years, reconceptualized it, and then readmitted as a cohort. I think one of the advantages of the EDD is it can be a cohort program. And for practitioners whose work can be really lonely anyway, that support of the cohort can be really useful. So from that perspective, the EDD is good. We changed our sort of mantra for the EDD program, and it became from practice through theory to practice. And I think that's a really good way of thinking about the EDD, that they are practitioners, they're part-time scholars, they're full-time practitioners, so from practice through theory to practice. And at the University of British Columbia, not at the University of Illinois. We didn't have the same kind of qualifying exams. We had them keep portfolios, talk about how the reflections had changed their practice, the impact of the EDD. So I think that was a really good model for practitioners. In the United States, the question is a little bit different because the EDD is often associated with superintendency certification, and when you've got certification involved, then it's not appropriate for international students. And so the PhD becomes the route that makes sense for international students whose contexts are different. So like in all things in education, the answer is it depends.
Okay.